me understand. Oh, for your loving, I can't get enough. When you tell me I can be there when you love again. When there's a fire, oh, fireman. If there is pain, babe, hold it up, oh. Don't be afraid to say I need you. I will understand. So help me understand. Oh, help me understand you. Smooth sailing when I understand. Smooth sailing on the other side. There's a fire, cold fireman. If you're in
2000. I was in a car accident.
All right, so like if you feel something that's something resonating with you, like make some noise, you know what I mean? Clap your hands, snap your fingers. All right, this is your living room, this is your home. And you know, act like you know, I know it. Okay. Oh man. Welcome everybody. Make some noise. Make some noise. Come on. Yeah. Austin, Texas. We are live with the Sonic Roots podcast. From the root to the fruit, we are getting into the soil with some of the greatest musicians that you can find in the world. They just happen to be here in Texas and beyond. Tonight, we are blessed with the presence of one of the most influential musicians to come out of Texas right now. You may have heard of him. You may have heard his name. You may have heard his music. He goes by the name of Adrian Casada. Let's make some noise. Let's go. We up in here. Let's get you situated. Man.
How you doing?
I'm excellent, man. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being a part of this first Sonic Roots podcast. This is history.
Hell yeah, I'm excited.
But you're used to that. You're used to making history.
Something like that. But congratulations on the spot, man. This is amazing. Yeah.
Let's just get right into what we call the soil here at Sonic Roots. Let's get right into it. Let's dig a little bit. Multiple interviews that I've seen of you. You talk about hip hop. You talk about the influence of hip hop on just you as a musician. Can you talk about those early moments when you encountered hip hop and how it influenced you?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, it's the most.
Man, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being a part of this.
Music
first
that I've had in
Sonic
my
Roots
life
podcast. This is history.
And we were just talking. I'm excited. A little bit about where I'm from, Laredo, Texas. It wasn't exactly.
You're used to making history.
The culture itself,
like that, but congratulations
but the
on
music.
The spot, man. Let's just get right into
MTV. It wasn't like I was, walking outside and people were, spray painting and graffiti and whatever and breakdancing in front of my house. It wasn't like that, but the music for whatever reason was what resonated the most to me, and it's what opened the doors later in life to jazz music, soul music, funk music, to a certain extent, even like a little bit of Latin music. Those doors were open because of hip hop, for sure. So it took me further than just, and I still appreciate hip hop, but it took me further than that. It opened a lot of other doors.
Mm-hmm. And your first beat machine, you got it 19 years old?
Yeah, an MPC 2000. I was in a car accident. Stick with me here for this story. So I was in a car accident. Somebody hit me on the highway and collected a hefty insurance payment for it, and I went and bought an MPC. Yeah.
What artists, what type of beats, what was influencing you? Can you name some specific artists, songs?
I mean, at the time, that was very much a lot of native tongue stuff. I was trying to do that. I was way into Pete Rock, and that was the time of before Jay Dilla when he was JD, and you could get the beat tapes, and I had all these JD beat tapes and Pete Rock, and all the obvious stuff was what I was. When I was in high school, I remember trying to dissect NWA stuff on a keyboard that I had, trying to figure out how that was all being done, and then getting into the MPC was the first time of really getting into samples and learning how to do that, And
you figured that all out on your own? Was anybody in your neighborhood or anybody helping you just figure it out, or you just bought it, came home, and just started?
I just bought it, came home, and started working with it. The guy who early on really helped me out was, and I was telling you, I met Babu Blakes when I was in college, and he was...
Make some noise for Babu Blakes.
Yeah, make some noise for Babu Blakes.
I heard some people out there know that name.
He was a total legend, and to me back then, and like the hip hop scene at the university at UT, a lot of stuff I would always go, and Bavu was there, and I was making beats by myself, but then there was a studio that a lot of people would get together at and make hip hop music, and it was right down the street from my apartment in Hyde Park. And I would just kind of go hang out there. I met a guy named DJ Massive, who I was telling you, like, he's, in and out of Austin, has been since back then. And he used to invite me over to his apartment, and he was really good on the MPC. He kind of opened up my world into, like, have you learned how to do this? And, like, he was the guy who, like, opened the doors of the MPC for me. Because up until that point, I was just, like, messing around and, like, and too scared to show anybody what I was doing. But Massive really knew the machine and knew how to get sounds out of it and knew how to, like, freak it a little bit more.
But was there any like specific song where you was just like, this is it? Like,
I don't think there was a specific song. Yeah, I don't know why. I just gravitated towards that.
Okay. And talk to me about Laredo, where you're from. Now, we were talking backstage, and you were saying that it's like 96% Mexican.
Yeah.
Like when you were growing up. So how did that influence your sound and your energy?
Yeah, it's one of those things I didn't realize. So I know that the statistic is right. It hovers around 95, 96. I think it's the least diverse big city in the United States, but least diverse in a way that it's actually 96% like Hispanic, Mexican American, whatever you want to call it. So it was a weird, like, skewed version of not being diverse. When people think of like no diversity, I'm like, well, I actually grew up in a place where everybody was Mexican, so it was kind of an interesting development. I didn't realize until I was older how much it influenced me, because not only did the culture of Laredo, but when you're from the border, you're basically raised between two countries, two cultures, two languages freely. You can, in Laredo, spend your whole day speaking English and people will speak Spanish back to you, and nobody budges on it at all. It's just part of how people communicate. So, I didn't realize until I was much older how much that influenced me musically, and that, like, I don't think of so many boundaries and genres and boxes and things for music. Like, if you're listening to a soul song, I hear how it blends into an Afro-Cuban song. I hear that, and I hear how it goes into a cumbia flawlessly, and I don't think, like, well, that's Spanish music, and that's this, to me, I'm like, you put on a song in Spanish and put on a song in English back to back, and that's actually how I grew up speaking anyway. So I think later on in life, I was like, oh, wow, that's why that's why I'm obsessed with Latin music, and I'm also obsessed with hip hop, and I'm also obsessed with rock and roll. It's just like, none of it fazed me, Like,
I kind of picture you, like, when you talk about obsession, like someone that just, like, hears all the different parts to a piece of music kind of immediately, or does it take you a while to absorb everything that's happening, or you just have this kind of immediate attention to all the different components?
Yeah, I kind of have unfortunately, sometimes, like, sometimes my brain, like, dissects music and it doesn't look like I'm enjoying it, or, like that, because my brain's just like, oh, I like how they did that, and and people are like, are you feeling this? I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling it totally, but like,
you trying to let them know you feel it,
but I think now that I think about songs when I was a little kid that I heard, when I think of them now, I would hear all the, when most people would know the lyrics and things like that, I would know all the other little sounds. Like when songs come on from, the 80s or the 90s, now when I hear them, I'm like singing all the, like, the one keyboard that comes here and the little thing that comes here. And that's how my brain always heard things. And I think that's what attracted me to production, was that,
Mm-hmm. And you described yourself kind of as like almost like a gym rat, but a studio rat. Like that's your safe space.
Yeah, for sure. And before when I was a kid, I was a visual artist, and I was an only child. I was by myself a lot, so I just always was doing something, and that was like, first it was art, and then it became music.
That's gonna take us right into UT.
Yeah.
So like you went to UT to study art. We're talking about a story there. Can you tell us about the last day at UT?
Yeah, I was an art major, and I was a painter. I was already doing music and way into music, but I didn't know if I wanted a degree in music or anything. And at that point, I was so far along. So I was a painter, but it was pretty obvious to my teachers and everybody that I was really a musician. And actually, the UT Art School at the time was really conceptual, and I realized that I didn't have a voice as an artist. All the artists there, you know, if I painted a still life of like a plant, and they would say, "Why did you paint a plant?" I was like, "I don't know. It was a freaking plant, and it looks cool. I don't know." And everybody there was like, "Well, that plant represents," and that's when I realized, well, I don't have a voice. I had no voice. I was like, it's just something I do. So I was already starting to like be weeded out of that, and I had a voice as a musician. Like I had something to say. But the last day of school, somebody broke into my locker, stole all my art supplies. Literally, you know, I don't know if any of y'all know, you know, have painted or anything, but oil paint is really expensive. I probably had $600-700 worth of supplies. They broke in, stole all of it. It was all gone, and I was like, that's just the universe telling me that's it, and I never painted again. So.
Isn't that crazy?
True story, yeah.
And then, so you got into Austin from there, and the Grupo guys, like when did that seed get planted?
We had already been playing when I was in college. So I moved here, and I started school here in '95, and they moved here in '96, like 1 year behind me. We had started playing in '96, but we weren't Grupo like the first. We had some other like pretty stupid names for a couple of years, and then we became.
Okay, we need the names.
Okay. Do you have to censor? So the first Grupo name was called the Young Silly Bitches. It was not my name. I swear to God. YSB.
That's kind of gangster.
Yeah.
In a weird
Beto
way.
came up with that. Not trying to snitch here, but Beto
Yeah,
came
but
up with
okay,
that.
but did that have like? Is it just like y'all just sitting around chilling and young silly bitches?
We
man?
would just play parties. We would just get together. It was 2 bands, and we would just jam and play parties. And he was like, "Young Silly Bitches," and it was literally YSB. I remember like making a flyer that said YSB.
Yes.
And then there was another name I forgot, and then it was like officially Grupo, yeah.
And whose idea was that? Like, is there any origin story behind that?
Yeah, we had started to play cumbias, which is really like the predominant music that you hear on the border, or at least, you know, where we were from the border. And that was like the dance party jam. Like that's what we would listen to. That's what we would get together and like listen at you know, our friend's house. We had a Grupo headquarters kind of house that was on Manor Road. And we would hang there and have like these late night parties, and we just got obsessed with like wanting to play cumbia. So we did it at a few parties, and it just like turned into an instant dance party all the time. So we were like, we should play more of that stuff, and we started to do it. And then we kind of like, because we started having that concept of like we're a Latin band and we play cumbias, we should give it a name like that. And Beto's always named all the bands, and he came up with Grupo Fantasma too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the history of cumbia for those like that don't know? I mean, it's a very popular music, but people out there may not know too much about it. Can you just talk about the history?
Was really, it's an Afro-Colombian rhythm, but in the country of Colombia was a music that it was really originally in its inception was music that slaves were doing, and part of like the dance that you see, the like shuffle side and side, was that's how the only way they could move, you know, like that. So it started with a rhythm that was had African roots, but with the instruments and the sounds of the country of Colombia, and that's like the real genesis. I mean, it's now spread to where every country has its variation of it. Like Mexico has its own styles of cumbia. Colombia still has a few, you know, whatever, depending on if you're on the Pacific coast and whatever. And as it made its way up to Mexico and into Texas, the accordion and those instruments started to be incorporated because of the German troops in the north of Mexico and in Texas had accordions, and that's just, you know, the necessity of whatever instrument was around. They started playing it and freaking it. So
okay,
yeah,
that's interesting. I didn't know that part about the accordion. Can you talk a little bit about like the members of the group, and then the journey from y'all are just kind of playing house parties or playing around town to, you know, Grammy nominated and Grammy award winning group? Yeah,
it was. We were just hanging out all the time back then, and like starting to play these gigs. And I called back then there was a place called the Empanada Parlor, which later was Easy Tiger on East 6th, and I don't know what it even is now. Things changed, so there was so much turnover with those spots. Our friend Damon Lang used to book it, and I'm sorry. Yeah. Damon, shout out Damon.
Okay. We got some folks in.
So like every weekend was either and DJ Baby G back then would do like
Yeah.
a dance hall reggae night called Soul Shakedown.
Okay.
And either like Baby G would do Fridays and Grupo would do Saturdays or vice versa. So man, it was just like the spot on the weekends. It was so much fun. We started to play there, and I told Damon, we booked our first gig and we became a band and played our first gig 3 days later. I promised Damon that we were going to sell out. I was like, give us Friday night. And he was like, man, I don't know. Like, you guys need to start on Monday. And I was like, no, I promise you we'll sell out Friday night. And we came close to selling out and we played our first show 3 days later. We started playing regularly, and like all of a sudden there was like a line around the block, and it just turned into a party.
How many people was a sellout at that point over there?
Well, we started, so Empanada Parlor had a small room downstairs, probably 150 people, and then we moved outside, and it was maybe like 300 people, and we started like to sell out there, and it just sort of took off from there.
I mean, when does it get into touring and all that, like moving around? And
fairly quickly, we started playing there for a while, and we back then had a guy in the band that was playing saxophone, and he became our manager eventually, Dave Lobel, and he was always very business minded and driven, and he like did the like DIY thing where he said like I'll figure out how to book us a tour, and we started doing these short runs to build crowds in like Atlanta and little regional runs like that, and then all of a sudden we were touring, and it's a lot easier to do that when you're like in your early 20s.
Yeah. So you're not quite married at that point?
No, not back then. Far from it. No.
And it was how many of y'all? Like, I mean, give me a picture. Like, how many of y'all at that time? And like, one van was y'all?
One van, and then we got to two vans. It was like 8 to 12 people with Grupo.
Ooh, it was getting real.
Sometimes like dudes would just show up and play percussion, and it was 12. Sometimes it was 9 of us, and then eventually it was like 9 or 10.
Yeah. And how was the money at that point? Are you making a living doing it, or are you doing some other stuff? Or?
I was doing other stuff, but it was it was a different time here. Like my rent was $300-400.
Ooh.
Back then.
You heard me?
Yeah.
You heard me?
Like, making a living, but not like, able to pay some bills. I also bluffed my way into a graphic design job, and was able to do that and play in bands, and it was just a different time.
You was doing graphic design for CD. You were doing CD graphic design.
CD cover design at a manufacturing place. Yeah. So I just bluffed my way. I told them I had an art degree, and they let me come in one weekend, and I just locked myself in there, figured it out, and it actually served me because I really liked doing that anyway. So I started doing like my bands and my friends' covers and stuff. But between that, which paid well, and Grupo gigs and cheap rent and like easy quality of life back then, and just not a lot of overhead and stuff, I was able to like scrape by every month.
How long from the Empanada Parlor to Grammy nomination? How long was that?
From Empanada Parlor to Grammy nomination, that was a good like 8 years or something.
Okay.
Like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a while.
And during that time, like, you're starting other things. You're doing. It's not just Grupo that you're doing, correct?
Yeah.
What else was happening?
Well, Grupo morphed. So originally, Grupo was that group of guys that would play that music. We were really playing like Latin funk, what we called. It was called Latin funk, but we called it that because we liked funk music with like Latin percussion. Kind of like we would play a lot of like b-boy jams and stuff. That very like early '70s b-boy.
Shout out B-Boy City.
Yeah, exactly. We played B-Boy City a few times. That's really what, before we became Grupo, that's what we were playing. So then when we started Grupo, I remember calling Beto and Greg and telling them like, man, we should get the other band back together. And so we started Brownout as the offshoot of Grupo.
Come on.
Yeah, and these guys are still around and still out there killing it, man. I just played with Brownout like a couple months ago, and we started Brownout, and then from there more offshoots of the band started and stuff like that. So we was definitely staying busy, and back then playing in 3 or 4 bands at a time was super fun, and just just a way to like keep it all exciting.
Did you at that point did you have any inkling of like a Grammy situation at all, or you're just playing, you're in Austin, you're figuring things out, finding yourself as a musician.
Yeah.
Tell me about like the Grammy now. Like, how did that come about?
I think our one of our albums, that was our third album, was put out by a label called Nat Geo, and it was funded by National Geographic. So it was the first time that we had like a little bit of muscle behind it. They had like a budget, and they were based in New York.
Yeah.
And suddenly it felt like they had more connections than when we were self-releasing it. So all of a sudden, it felt. But then what didn't hurt was that was around the time that we were playing with Prince. So it was like all of a sudden our name was thrown up there into people's top of mind and conversations with like that. We were the band that was playing with Prince. So that didn't hurt. All of a sudden people, Grammy voters, sort of knew who I think our name was at the time.
Right. We're gonna talk about Prince in a second, but
yeah.
So you're at the Grammys, right? You didn't win, and then the second time you got nominated, y'all were at a truck stop.
Yeah, the second time we, the second time we got nominated,
didn't go, right?
I didn't go. Oh, some people went.
Okay.
The second time we were a 10-piece band and they offered us 4 tickets. Yeah, for real. So like everybody was arguing and like
eeny, meeny, miny.
And then at that point, I just thought it was stupid. I was like, man, this is dumb. I'm not even gonna go. So I just bowed out and like was like, I don't even care. Y'all go. But we did tour on the way up there and like got to LA, and then a couple of the guys went, and then we were driving back and stopped to watch it at a truck stop and won a Grammy at a truck stop. Yeah.
Yeah. Come on. And like, I mean, you got like, I know you're like, I can't imagine like you. I don't know what a wild out Adrian looks like. I'm trying to like just wilding. I don't know if that.
I bought a bottle of champagne. I had bought one the day before.
No?
Yeah. So ish, because it was like a Sunday, and I bought it the day before. I bought like a bottle of Corbel or whatever Corbet or whatever that champagne is, and kept it. And we were on a bus at that point, and we like got back on our bus, and I busted out. The driver started driving, and I dropped it, and it rolled and like all spilled out. So like, it was, and then our bus broke down, and the driver got sick. It was like the whole day was crazy, and then we had to like all pull over and crowd into a little hotel room in like the middle of Arizona, and so we had like no champagne, no anything. Then we bought beer, and that was our celebration. But I didn't go. I thought that year I was like, man, this is dumb, and yeah.
Can you like talk a little bit about Beto, Greg, like your relationship with them?
Yeah.
I mean, you've known them since Laredo, and you said like back there, you're saying like they were in a cool band, they were playing funk, but like how much what's your relationship like with them, and what can you share about their your relationship?
Man, it's I just texted with them today. I mean, they're like my brothers. We've been through like so much together, and we like moved here with the same dream, and we're all still here. We're all doing that and involved in different ways. Every time I get to hang out with them or hear from them, I'm just like beaming with pride that like Greg is now involved in behind the scenes in the music scene in the city. Besides the fact that they're still in bands that are like in Austin institutions, Beto's killing it. All those guys are. Beto's now mentoring countless amazing young bands, not just Latin bands, but a lot of Latin bands that like recognize that he was one of the people that made it so that commonplace to be a different Latin band in Austin, because that was part of why with Grupo we would play Empanada Parlor and we would play emos and we would play these places. Was like we didn't fit into the salsa scene. The salsa scene back then was like dance lessons and like sexy dudes with like muscles and black t-shirts and cologne in their hair.
You never tried it, bro. You never tried it.
And that was no. Don't knock it till you try it. But that just wasn't our scene, man. We were like, man, we go to hip hop nights, we go to Baby G, we go to Nasties. That's not like we don't go to these places. And it was nothing against them, because the level of musicianship was high, and we eventually became friends with a lot of these people. But it just wasn't our thing. So a lot of, when I see Beto mentoring like these bands, I'm like, yeah, there was a time where there wasn't a lot of bands doing that. So yeah, those guys were in Laredo. They had a band called the Blimp Trio. And
that's Beto again?
Beto, Greg, yeah.
The Blimp Trio?
Yes, Beto probably came up with that name.
Okay.
And they weren't a trio.
Wait, what?
They were at some point a trio, but I'll let Beto explain all these band names in the comments.
Okay, all right.
The Blimp Trio, and when I was a senior in high school, they were like their tape. I got their tape, and they would play these places. I saw them at a couple of parties, and they were like they were playing funk
They
music.
had like a professional tape, like with like a cover and everything.
Man. And they were killing in Laredo. They were like a big deal, and I thought they were like the cool kids. And then I was grounded for a lot of my senior years, so I like didn't get to go out.
Wait, what?
I was like,
what happened?
in trouble.
What did you do?
I actually don't remember. I talked to my parents about that the other day. I don't remember. I just like maybe it was bad grades, but I didn't get to like do anything for like half my senior year. But then when I moved here, I remembered hearing like all the Blimp Trio guys are coming too, and I was like, hell yeah! And the minute they got here, we all started hanging, and never looked back. I mean, I was just texting literally with Beto and Greg today. So
we can go a little deeper on this one. Do you ever doubt yourself musically?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah. Still, yeah.
Like, what's that like? Like, how so? Like, how does it come up?
I don't ever. It's funny because once I start playing, I don't have a lot of doubt. It's the the anxiety that I have before I do anything. With guitar, I think I've been playing long enough, and I've been in enough situations and scenarios now that I don't have like a lot of anxiety about guitar anymore. I can, pretty much just walk into any situation, feel comfortable because I've seen it all play. But with a lot of other stuff, still with production and I still fiddle with hip hop beats and stuff like that. I still doubt it. I still doubt everything I'm doing. I like. A lot of that comes from I work by myself a lot, and when you're by yourself, you kind of start to overthink things. Once I get in a room with other people, I like kind of ease up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So it's more like on the production side than just the straight you and the instrument side.
Yeah, but honestly, even with the instrument, because I had a different approach to the guitar. I was never like a shredder or any of that, and I know that that's how a lot of people. Judge a guitar player. It's like, can you go like, and like that was just I was never into that, and so like a lot of people's perception of like, oh, you're not playing like super fast,
right?
It's like, so I still sometimes think like, oh man, they're not gonna get like where I'm coming from musically on guitar, but I don't care at this point.
Let's talk about that Latin Shade of Soul album. Yeah. Oh, y'all heard that one? Yeah. Make some noise. Come on, man. Let's talk about the album, but also, like, is that how you see yourself? Are you a Latin Shade of Soul? Is that
something like that? Yeah.
You got that tattooed on your back somewhere or something?
Beto came up. No, I'm just kidding. Beto called me that. No.
YSB.
That when we first were doing Grupo, like early on, we did this thing. My wife Celeste back then had started this thing called ALMA, the Austin Latin Music Association. Like that's way back, and they were doing these like pilot TV shows, and we did one with the legendary Ruben Ramos, amazing singer here in town, who El Gato Negro, and I always knew him growing up because of like Tejano music, which is a lot of the music that we would hear when we were growing up. I always thought that's what Ruben was like. He's a Tejano singer. It was the first time that I met him and sat down with him. He's an elder that we respected a lot. And I remember hearing him talk. So this was a long time ago. This was in the early Grupo days. This planted the seed for that album. That's where I'll connect the dots. But he was saying like, when he was young, he was like, he was into R&B, and he's like, I was into rhythm and blues. I mean, back then was rhythm and blues, soul, rock and roll.
Yeah.
He's like, he was saying he didn't really start singing in Spanish until much later, until like the 70s. And he was like, before that, he was like, I wanted to be an R&B singer. I was into like, this and that. And I remember like listening to him and thinking of all the parallels of like us and the Grupo guys and thinking like, well, that's, for us, like we didn't really grow up wanting to sing in Spanish. We like eventually embraced it later and felt a responsibility to do that. But when I was listening to him say it, I'm like, man, it just all comes full circle, and you never realize like how many people, open doors before you even were able to do this. And it just like blew me away to hear him tell all that, and like the similarities of to where we were in our like musical development and where we were from. And I just always thought, man, like, and all those guys, the like Ruben Ramos, there's another amazing musician, Little Joe, Little Joe de la Familia, Sonny and the Sunliners, who's now sort of like having a little revival. Yeah, make some noise for all these guys. Were all these Mexican-American musicians in Central Texas that were inspired by soul music, and it was mostly happening in San Antonio, but what was cool about it, but that you had black people, you had brown people, you had, white people, you had everybody coming together in this music, and it was a really inclusive version of soul, like early back then, because you had the troops in San Antonio, you had people coming with music from Detroit, and you had, there was a base down there, but you also had the proximity to Mexico. You had all these Mexican, American people that were bringing their mariachi music, and it became this whole synthesis version of soul. And I always just thought, like, man, it would be really cool to connect the dots while we still have all these legends in their prime, connected to what like the Grupo and I guys were doing. So I had that seed for that album like a long time ago. It just took forever to get somebody behind it. But that was the point of that, was connecting the dots with all that,
When give us like an idea, like when you come up with an idea like that, finding the support and everything, like what's that like? Like you said you had the idea, but how did you garner the support that you needed to do it? Like what was that journey like?
Man, that was just being at the right place at the right time. I mean, I probably had that idea for 10 years, like, and was just like telling everybody. It was like telling anybody that would listen.
So
and
it's like, all right, fine, man, here.
So I would just tell anybody, like, man, there's it, and they were just like, yeah, sure. But then eventually, there was a label from New York called Big Crown, and they re-released some of Sonny and the Sunliner stuff. Okay. And all of a sudden, like that music was big in like the kind of lowrider scene in California and stuff. But all of a sudden, like everybody became a lowrider, and everybody was into this stuff. And then now people were more open to my idea that I was like, yeah, I've been telling y'all for like 10 years. But sure, everybody's a lowrider now, so let's all be lowriders together. So I was able to, through a label in LA that I had worked with, finally one of them was like, that's a great idea. When you're up here, like we had a meeting with somebody from Amazon Music, and they were like, I really like that idea. So we got like,
he knew somebody from Amazon? Like,
yeah.
Okay.
So we got somebody from Amazon Music finally, like after, 10 years, was like, that's a really great idea, and let me check on that. And he was like, I got funding for it. So that was able to, they really came through because I was able to have funding for it, and like do it comfortably and pay everybody well. And that was a big thing for me. It was like, man, I can like call in favors if I wanted to, but I'd rather pay people. And I was able to, they got behind it. So the timing was just all of a sudden, there was more attention on like cool young kids wanting to like embrace this music of Sonny and Little Joe and whatnot.
All right, we're gonna pull that song up. This is a song we have a friend in common, Martine. Shout out Martine Perrin.
Shout out Martine.
This is a song that that you with your project with him called Ocote Soul Sounds, where I was always like, WTF, man? Like, how did y'all? What is this? So can you play that ever? Can you run that? I just want to know like how y'all came up with this. Oh, no? Are we good? Let's go. Okay, let's go. It's right here. Turn it up. You gotta wait for it though. Turn it up, baby. like there's certain pieces of music where I'm just like, okay, how did that start? Like, where is this coming from? I mean, I hear the break beat, obviously,
yeah.
but I mean, talk about that.
Yeah, that was you hear like that was back when the brownout days where we were way into the breaks and like learning that like b-boy vocabulary in the breaks.
Pause. Hold on. The song Contra El Sol, right?
Contra el Sol, yeah.
Okay.
Against the sun, yeah.
Against the sun.
So at the time, I was also really getting into a lot of like late 60s, early 70s soundtracks and scores. There was all kinds of really cool, Italian and French composers that had done all this music that was sampled in hip hop later, that popped up a lot in hip hop songs later. And it was readily available back then. It was easier to find finally to like, all this stuff I had heard about. Now you could buy the reissues of these like records without having to pay $500. So I started at the time was really getting into a lot of these like French and Italian scores and soundtracks that were like funky as hell, but weird like that. So you hear like those both of those worlds back then. And that was my neighbor is a keyboard player. He plays with Brownout, Money Chicha. He plays with all those guys now. Peter is a genius, like Peter Sapczynski, a genius, classically trained musician. And I remember bringing him over and like trying to show it to him on guitar, and he just played the whole thing on keyboards like dunga 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 like in like 5 minutes. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I was like singing it to him and trying to show it to him, and that's him playing keys. And at the time, Martin, I think, was staying with us for a while.
Okay.
So we were like making a lot of music.
And it's the length of it too. It's just like what? How did you decide to just? It's like 1:30 seconds.
I don't even remember that.
You
Yeah.
don't remember?
No.
Just. He's like, yo, we just did
No,
it.
I don't remember why it's so short.
So we're gonna take it to the 70s, the psychedelic, interest. Like, okay, so have you taken psychedelics?
Yeah, I have, and it's funny because yeah, but I'm like I've lost touch. Like I don't know what is psychedelic anymore, or like
It's deep.
No, it's
I don't even know anymore, man.
Sometimes I think things are psychedelic and people are like, that's not psychedelic. And but sometimes I'm like doing something and they're like, that's so psychedelic. I'm like, I don't even know. But I was talking to Kevin Curtin from The Chronicle, and he asked me something about psychedelic. And I made that joke. I'm like, man, I don't even know what that is. And he goes, Adrian, it's music that sounds good when you're on drugs. And I was like, oh.
No, but I'm saying, have you taken like mushrooms, like actual psychedelics? Okay.
Yeah.
So is there any music come out of that, or can you talk about that?
Not necessarily,
No?
I don't find like I don't find like I can create in those states. I can get inspired and really open my mind to things, but yeah, I don't like function highly.
You're just like,
yeah, I can listen to stuff and appreciate it, but I'm not like
yeah.
killing it on the guitar after that.
Facts. Okay, this question is about Africa. What does Africa mean to you?
I think Africa is the cradle of civilization, and in so many ways, the cradle of a lot of not just civilization, but I think culture, or at least the things that I've gravitated towards,
What about Mexico?
Mexico, to me, every time I'm there, it really feels like home. There's a connection to, where my family has been from. I mean, obviously I have, like most Mexican people, a lot of us have roots in Europe, so it's like usually a third roots in Europe, a third Native American, a third kind of mix between all these other things. But Mexico, to me, when I go there, definitely feels like home. And every time I'm there, I'm like, I need to come here more often, and I need to spend more time here more often. And it definitely feels like there's a real connection to it that I feel when I'm there.
Yeah, I was watching some interviews last week, and I saw you speaking Spanish, and I was like thrown off. Like I never heard you speaking Spanish, and you're on these television shows.
Yeah.
It was really cool. I was like, oh,
yeah. Spanish was my first language growing up on the border, but yeah, now that when they know that we're putting out an album, and there's anything they already know that they can pitch that I can do Spanish or whatever. So.
We're gonna jump into. We got a little purple energy going on, so you know where we're going with that. Let's talk about Prince.
Yeah.
For a second. First of all, like favorite song or two from Prince.
I really like Well, I have a real connection to the stuff that we were playing with him, just because it was just like a real special moment in time. But that era of when we were playing with him was around when he did the Musicology album and the 3121 album. There was a song called Musicology that I really like, and then from the early stuff I really like. I Want to Be Your Lover. I like what's the one that Shaka Khan did? I Feel For You. I Feel For You, like that really early stuff. Like I really gravitate towards that. But the era of the stuff we were playing with him like was really special for me, like because I just have a real emotional connection to it.
Take us back. Okay, all right. Let's take it back to that moment in Vegas. So there's a band that's playing at his club, 3121. They decide they're not playing Thanksgiving, and y'all get a call?
Yeah, so we sent them we had put out, Grupo had made a live album. We sent them the CD. We had a connection through our old manager. He knew a guy that worked for Prince, and he was like, it all started with Prince once. We told Prince we were going to send him an album, and he said he would listen to it. And everything was like, the communication was always like, they would write back like, Prince is going to hear your album tomorrow at noon. We were like, so that was always like, that's how things were, We were like, oh, damn. So like the next day at noon, you're like yeah. Prince is listening to my album, and then like a week later, it was like, Prince liked your album. We were like, crazy. It was kind of that like mystery, like the way you imagine the mystery.
I just see him like whispering to someone.
Yeah. Type this. Yeah.
I like it.
So we knew that he liked it. We knew that he heard it. And then out of nowhere, it was like a few days notice, I think. And they were like, hey, he had a Latin. So he had a club and he curated every Wednesday through Saturday. Wednesday was old school night. And he would get like, Dougie Fresh or Larry Graham, and like all his idols would play Wednesday nights. And then Thursday night was a Latin night, and then he would play Fridays and Saturdays. Thursday night, we got a call that was like, this Thursday, or that Thanksgiving was a Thursday, and they were like, that band doesn't want to play, and he's offering it to you guys. I mean, that was a huge deal. We were like, if the story had ended there, that would have been crazy. We were like, oh yeah, we're gonna go play. So we went and played Thanksgiving. We were like looking for him all night, and we saw him finally like on the side of the stage, and then went back to the green room and waited for him, and he just never came. We were like, but that's how he rolled. There was always like some mystery to it. So we were like waiting for a while, and he never showed up. We were like, again, if the story had ended there, that would have been a story I would have told my kids. But we flew home the next morning, and by the time we landed, they were like, he fired the other band. And he wants y'all to be every Thursday night band. So we were like, crazy. Let's go. So we started going every Thursday, yeah.
And how long were y'all doing that?
It was a few months. And then he started to finally come and sit in with us. And then he started to like come and like talk to us. And then from there, he started to invite us. I think that was around when it was closing. He started asking us to go play with him in places.
So the club was closing, and he was like, I want y'all around. Yeah,
we started to go do like some parties with him, and like little by little back him up here and there, and he kept us around after that.
Did you ever like have moments where like you were one-on-one with him or no?
Me personally, one-on-one, no, but like, a few of us with him, yeah, we spent time with him. Like I was, backstage with him, like about to come on like this, we would be back there with him, and we had a lot of moments with him for sure. I mean, he still, was majestic and like would roll in and stuff like that, but he very much would have to like be backstage with us and stuff. So we would hang out with him.
Yeah. What's your fondest memory that you have from that time?
A bunch of them, and like I think just how funny he was. Like I think there was always legends that we heard, like you can't look him in the eye, you can't do all that. And maybe at some point, maybe in the early '80s, at the height of like Purple Rain or whatever, like maybe he was like that. With us, he was real cool, man. He was, he was not like people were like, what was it? I'm like, he wasn't like exactly like you or me, like he was a He was
We know that.
yeah,
Yeah.
more of like a sacred interstellar being, but he also would like kick it and be hilarious as hell. Like he would clown us, and we make jokes with him and stuff. And I remember them telling us like that's why he likes you guys, is because he could like feel like one of the guys around. You know, when we got pretty comfortable with him. You know,
I know. So like, you just seem so chill about everything. Like, was there a point where you felt like my musical dreams are like happening, or you still kind of like we're just coming here on Thursday and we're just touring, or like was there a point where you started to feel like, okay, like I'm doing this?
yeah, there was a few. Yeah, I remember around that time was a big one. You know,
Okay.
that was the one that like, you know, when you're coming home for Thanksgiving and trying to explain to the family like what you do, or you're, you know, telling, they're just like, oh, that's cool, you know. But then when you're like, yeah, I played with Prince, and they're like, finally people are like, oh, Prince? They're like, yeah, Prince. I know Prince. I played with Prince. I have his pick in my pocket. Like, I've been trying to tell y'all for 10 years, but yeah. So yeah, all of a sudden, like people it starts to feel like, yeah, this is legit. Like, you know, we are like playing with Prince. That's a big thing.
Did things change? You got the award of the Grammys. Did things change the second time around when you're coming back with the Black Pumas? And let's talk about that moment.
Yeah, the Grammys with the Black Pumas versus Grupo were like really different, because Grupo was nominated for Best Latin. The categories changed, but it was like Best Latin Rock-ish. Then they changed the category, but those categories aren't televised. Those are like,
right.
You know, the majority of the Grammys are not televised. I don't remember the number, but really only like 20 of them are on TV, and really there's like 200 during the day. So like most of the Grammys actually takes place during the day in a little ballroom, and it's not that like glamorous. It's cool, but it's not like what you see on TV. They just like get through them real quick. They're just like blah blah blah, and the next one is, you know, and then with Black Pumas, all of a sudden we were like nominated for two of the big. I think it was two of the like the main four categories that are on TV.
Yeah.
At the end, sitting on the floor next to, you know, it was like totally different experience. With Grupo, it was like we had to beg for tickets. Like, can we please go to the thing, and just, you know, and they're like, sure, I guess. And then we had like nosebleeds. And with Black Pumas, it's like your seats are over here.
Yeah, sir.
And it's like there's Bruno Mars, and there's, you know, it's like you're literally right there on the camera in the thing. So it was like a very different Grammy experience. Yeah.
But you felt different? You felt different, like internally, like with that experience, or was it
Yeah, for sure. And also, I had the advantage of I remember our first manager with Grupo. This was like apparently a football thing. Some coach had said this, but he would say like when they got to the Super Bowl, he was like, just act like you've been here before. And remember, like with Grupo, it was like he would tell us that, and I'm like, yeah, it's kind of hard to like do that. But then by the time of Black Pumas, all that going to the Grammys, I was like, yeah, I've been here before. Like I felt more like, yeah, a little more at ease, but it was still like a much higher profile.
Shout out Brian Ray.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, y'all don't know, but Brian Ray's the one that introduced Adrian, or maybe some of y'all know, but he's the one that introduced you to Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that real quick. Like, I watched a bunch of interviews, and y'all were always like, oh yeah, this friend of ours, and like I had to wait. It was like the 10th interview I watched where Eric was like, yeah, Brian Ray.
Yeah.
And I don't know if y'all know Brian Ray, but he's a producer out here, and I was just like, oh, that's what's up.
Yeah.
But like, tell us about that moment. You're looking for a musician, and he.
Yeah, Brian lives like 2 blocks from my house. He lives in my neighborhood. So like we like get together here and there, and he wanted to get coffee one day. He wanted to pick my brain about something. I don't even remember. He was like, "Man, I want to pick your brain. Let's get coffee." And I had already started asking people if they knew somebody who would, you know, work on these like soul songs with me. And people would send me like names and suggestions, like check out this singer, and I never reached out to anybody. I was like, I don't know, it's too this or it's too that, and I was just kind of like kept forgetting about it. I went to lunch with Brian Ray, and he was like asking me for advice on something. And I remember like specifically walking back to my car, being at my door and turning around, and because he's a producer and he works with a lot of young talent that like is not on my radar. I remember like from my car door being like, hey, by the way, I'm working on this like kind of soul stuff. I was like, do you know anybody who would like be into it? And he's like, at his car door, and he was like, yeah, hit up this guy Eric Burton, he's the best singer I've ever worked with. And he just like closed the door and like literally like was closing the door, and I was like, okay, cool. I was like, send me. Then he like texted me the name, and that's Brian. And I got home and like looked it up, and I was like, I saw some videos of Eric playing. I saw one at Sahara Lounge with him playing guitar and like playing solo, and it was like, oh yeah, I was like, this is a much more compelling like person that I want to collaborate with. Yeah.
Shout out Sahara Lounge.
Shout out Sahara Lounge.
Eileen and Topaz.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, what was it specifically, or is it just? What was it?
There was a lot to it. I remember the obvious thing, obviously, is that, and he says the best singer I've ever worked with, and I watched it and was like, yeah, that voice is crazy, and I didn't know anything about him. I had just Googled him. I remember really being into the way he played guitar. Actually, he had like a real unique way of playing guitar when he accompanies himself, and he just had a whole like vibe to him that I was like, man, this is like a really like I can't. My first thought was like, I can't believe I've never because I've been here for a while. I'm a producer. I have a studio. I meet a lot of people. I was like, how have I never heard of this guy? This is crazy, and he had never heard of me, and it was like perfect that we met like that. But I was just like, man, I feel like if I would have seen this guy, I would have already hounded him to get in the studio. And there was something about it. But a lot of it really, honestly, besides the voice and the songs and everything, was like seeing him play guitar. I was like, man, he has a real unique way of doing things.
Mm-hmm. And the album, how did y'all put that together?
So I had originally already recorded some instrumentals, and I just wanted somebody to like help write to them and sing them. We didn't have, and he just started coming over and doing that. And then he was like, after a few times of him coming over, we'd be hanging, and he'd be like, check out my songs, and like it's like Colors, and like they're all like him on an acoustic. Or I was just like, wow. So after we finished a bunch of the ones that I had laid down like already before I met him, I remember telling him like we should record some of these, and like it just all fit. Like it was like the perfect synthesis of like what he was writing and the production style of what we were doing back then. And we worked for a lot in 2017, but we weren't even going to be a band. We weren't even going to. We were just doing it. Like we didn't know. You know what it's like. You collaborate with people in the studio. It may never come out. You know, I have a lot of stuff like that.
Well, I mean, look, I heard it. I can't remember how I heard it. I feel like it was something like a tweet or something. And it was like a demo. Somehow it got to me, and I'm the first person to book Black Pumas ever, y'all. Ever.
Yeah. At the South by party at the Parish.
Ever.
Yeah.
South by Southwest. I booked them straight off of that demo, and
that's how we met Jerron too.
That's how you
Jerron was playing with y'all.
Yeah, Jerron. Shout out Jerron Marshall. Shout out Jerron.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, he was playing keys with us.
Mm-hmm.
The album just came together just through sessions, and y'all that's it.
Yeah, we were doing that, and by the end of 2017, we had, I don't know, maybe 8, 9 songs, and it was like, and I kind of wanted to play, and that had always kind of been a dream of mine to be in a band like that, but I was coming off like, we were in 5 bands with Grupo.
Right.
And I didn't want to I was like, damn, I can't start another band. Like, it would just get stupid now. Then I have to call Beto for a name, and like, it's like I was like, I can't be in another band. Like, I just can't do that. I was trying to do more production work, but I remember
you kind of have a problem with creating bands. Beto too, like
yeah,
y'all both.
So I remember telling Eric, like, it was like, man, it'd be really dope if we played this stuff live. He's like, I know, right? I'm like, it would be kind of a shame if we didn't like play this stuff live,
like around the world. Like.
So we had said like we were gonna just do like a couple of months. We were like, let's just play a couple of months and just like for fun and just see what happens, and just took off from there.
That's crazy. And how did y'all get in? Like ATO found y'all, or like how did that start to?
We started working with Ryan Madison, our manager, who I had worked with in the past in another band. He called me. So one of the things that I thought I wanted Black Pumas was to feel like really organic. Like I didn't want it to be like I had been in a band before where we were like, like in like industry, new band with the industry and playing these like showcases to like, labels, and just felt like you're playing to suits, and like just wasn't feeling that. I was like, man, that's just not like, I wanted it to be fun and organic. And the first few gigs, I remember like I remember telling Celeste, I was like, well, don't come to the first gig. I was like, we might suck. Just like give us a few gigs, like come. But Ryan called me like I had worked with him before. Like by the third gig, he's like, what's up with this Black Pumas thing? And I'm like, oh, it's this project with this guy. I was like, just come check it out. He came, and then that first South by Southwest rolled around, and we played, and all of a sudden, it just word of mouth. Like, I remember at that showcase we did with you all, like, hearing about certain people that were in there, like, listening, and, man, it just really happened, like, organically, but it happened really fast. And then when Ryan was able to start from there, like, checking the interest out there, and we had a lot of labels interested. We like actually met. It was my first time of like doing that whole thing where like we had like meetings with record labels and we were being wined and dined and stuff like that.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, and we went with ATO. That felt more real to us. And we met with major labels, man. We met with like, I'm not gonna like name drop, but we met with like, I'll name drop here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like some like, you know, substantial like real big name type people that do things in the industry, but they just ATO felt more real, and it felt like they were truly behind it and just really believed in it. You know,
were they offering more money to other labels, other situations?
we didn't get that far like with money and stuff like that, but it definitely felt like ATO's interest was. We knew that was more like for the long haul, you know, versus like somebody who's gonna come and like. Try to just cash out right away and like make money and stuff. So,
and then, you know, y'all are traveling all around the world. Like, you know, within basically a year, you're like just doing world tours, right? U.S. tours, world tours, or is it 2 years?
The first year we were like U.S. I think we did like a couple of showcases in Europe. There were like a couple of people that wanted to book us out there and said like, if you come play this one festival, it'll turn you on to all these other like people. And we did a couple of European dates. By the next year, we were like touring the world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I mean, he's so chill, right? It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, bro, like, you're a legend, man. But okay, so then what happened from that time to like, we all kind of got the news like, okay, they're not gonna be doing music anymore. They're taking a break. Like, was it y'all just exhausted, or everybody?
A number of things. What was happening was back then was we were always getting bigger and bigger every month. So like we'd be on tour